Tiny feathers in the morning light, fluttering softly, taking flight. Buzzing hums in the meadow's breeze, a symphony among the trees. Little wings of wonder in the air, dancing freely without a care. From the skies to the forest floor, nature's beauty forevermore.
Little Wings of Wonder. Episode 5. Feeding Stations That Work. The Art and Science of Hummingbird Feeding. Brought to you by the 1940s romance murder mystery novel, Underlying Love, a Worthington, Ohio mystery, and by the Little Wings of Wonder book series, both available at major book retailers. Creating an effective hummingbird feeding station involves far more than simply hanging a feeder filled with sugar water. The most successful feeding stations combine strategic placement, appropriate equipment, high-quality nectar, and consistent maintenance to create reliable resources that hummingbirds can depend upon throughout their active seasons. When done correctly, artificial feeding stations can support substantial hummingbird populations while providing intimate viewing opportunities that bring these remarkable birds within arm's reach of human observers. The decision to provide artificial nectar sources carries with it a responsibility to maintain those resources consistently and safely. Hummingbirds quickly learn to depend on reliable food sources and may adjust their territorial boundaries and daily routines around productive feeders. Poor maintenance or inconsistent filling can leave birds without expected resources at critical times, potentially affecting their survival and reproductive success. Modern hummingbird feeding has evolved far beyond the simple glass tubes of earlier generations. Today's feeders incorporate sophisticated designs that address the challenges of weather protection, pest exclusion, and ease of maintenance, while providing optimal feeding conditions for hummingbirds. Understanding the strengths and limitations of different feeder designs allows gardeners to select equipment that matches their specific conditions and maintenance capabilities. Feeder types. Choosing the right equipment. Gravity-fed. Tube feeders. Traditional tube-style feeders use gravity to deliver nectar through small ports equipped with feeding tubes or perches. These feeders typically feature a central reservoir with multiple feeding stations arranged around the circumference, allowing several birds to feed simultaneously, while providing good visibility for observers. The primary advantage of tube feeders lies in their simplicity and reliability. With no moving parts to malfunction, these feeders provide consistent nectar delivery as long as the ports remain clear and the seals remain intact. The transparent reservoirs allow easy monitoring of nectar levels and quality, while the typically red coloration helps attract hummingbirds from considerable distances. Modern tube feeders incorporate numerous design improvements over earlier models. Bee guards, small plastic cages that surround the feeding ports, prevent bees and wasps from accessing nectar, while allowing hummingbirds to extend their bills through the openings. Built-in moats around the hanging mechanism prevent ants from reaching the nectar, while drip-resistant designs minimize waste and reduce the likelihood of attracting unwanted insects. The capacity of tube feeders varies considerably, from small 8-ounce models suitable for single-bird territories to large 32-ounce versions that can support multiple birds throughout extended periods. Larger feeders require less frequent refilling, but may allow nectar to deteriorate before consumption in situations with low bird activity. Dish or saucer feeders. Saucer-style feeders place the nectar reservoir in a shallow dish with feeding ports located in the center or around the rim. This design offers several advantages over tube feeders, including easier cleaning, reduced likelihood of fermentation, and better protection from insects that might otherwise access nectar through feeding ports. The shallow reservoir design prevents nectar from becoming trapped in hard-to-clean areas, while the wide opening allows easy access for thorough washing. Because the nectar level remains visible at all times, gardeners can easily monitor consumption rates and nectar quality without removing covers or inverting feeders. Many saucer feeders incorporate ant moats directly into their design, with the feeding dish suspended above a water-filled outer ring that prevents crawling insects from reaching the nectar. Some models include removable bee guards or feeding ports that can be adjusted to exclude larger insects while accommodating hummingbird bills. The low profile of saucer feeders makes them less conspicuous in garden settings, while providing stable feeding platforms that reduce spillage during windy conditions. However, their typically smaller capacity requires more frequent refilling compared to similarly sized tube feeders. Window feeders. Specialized window feeders use suction cups or other mounting systems to attach directly to glass surfaces, bringing hummingbirds within inches of indoor observers. These feeders typically feature smaller capacities than traditional hanging models, but provide unparalleled viewing opportunities for photography, education, and close observation of hummingbird behavior. The proximity to human activity that window feeders create can help habituate hummingbirds to human presence, often resulting in calmer birds that allow closer approach and extended observation. The stable mounting and protection from wind that window installation provides can make these feeders particularly attractive to nervous or territorial birds. However, window feeders require careful consideration of safety factors. The proximity to glass surfaces can increase the risk of window strikes, particularly when feeders are mounted on large, reflective windows. Strategic placement near screens, decals, or other visual barriers can reduce this risk while maintaining the benefits of close observation. Specialty and decorative feeders. The hummingbird feeder market includes numerous specialty designs that prioritize aesthetics or address specific challenges. Decorative feeders shaped like flowers, featuring stained glass elements, or incorporating artistic metalwork can enhance garden beauty while serving functional purposes. First-person feeders designed to be held or worn allow the ultimate in close hummingbird encounters, though they require patience and still behavior from human participants. These feeders often feature multiple small ports and comfortable gripping surfaces that encourage extended holding periods. Heated feeders designed for winter use incorporate electrical elements that prevent nectar from freezing in cold climates. These specialized feeders allow year-round feeding in areas where resident hummingbird populations might otherwise lack adequate food sources during winter months. Strategic placement for maximum effectiveness. Location considerations. Feeder placement significantly affects both hummingbird usage and observer satisfaction. The ideal location balances accessibility for birds with protection from predators, weather, and unwanted pests. Open areas that allow hummingbirds to approach from multiple directions, while maintaining escape routes, typically receive the most consistent use. Distance from natural cover requires careful consideration. Feeders placed too far from trees and shrubs may feel exposed and threatening to hummingbirds, while those positioned too close to dense vegetation may provide cover for predators. A distance of 10 to 15 feet from substantial cover typically provides an optimal compromise between security and accessibility. Height affects both bird comfort and maintenance convenience. Most hummingbirds prefer feeding stations positioned 4 to 6 feet above ground level, though individual species and local conditions may influence preferences. Positioning feeders within easy reach for cleaning and refilling encourages consistent maintenance while allowing close observation of feeding behavior. Territorial considerations. Hummingbird territorial behavior significantly influences feeder placement strategies. Dominant birds often claim prime feeding locations and aggressively exclude competitors, potentially preventing subordinate birds from accessing nectar. Strategic placement of multiple feeders can help address these territorial conflicts while supporting larger bird populations. Spacing feeders beyond the line of sight of each other can prevent single birds from monopolizing multiple stations. Placing feeders around corners, behind trees, or at different elevations creates separate territories that different birds can claim without constant conflict. The number of feeders required depends on local hummingbird populations and the aggressiveness of dominant individuals. A single territorial male may successfully defend 2 or 3 closely spaced feeders, while the same area might support a dozen or more birds if feeders are distributed across multiple territories. Seasonal positioning. Optimal feeder placement may change throughout the season as sun angles shift, vegetation grows, and weather patterns evolve. Spring placement should prioritize early morning sun exposure to warm nectar and create attractive feeding conditions for returning migrants. Summer positioning must consider protection from excessive heat that can cause rapid nectar deterioration. Afternoon shade becomes increasingly important as temperatures rise, while adequate air circulation helps prevent fermentation and maintains nectar quality. Fall placement should maximize protection from wind and storms while maintaining accessibility for migrating birds building fat reserves for their journeys. Late-season feeders often receive heavy use and may require more frequent attention than during other periods. Nectar recipes and preparation. The perfect formula. The ideal hummingbird nectar mimics the sugar concentration found in natural flower nectars, providing optimal energy density while remaining easy for birds to consume. Extensive research has established that a solution containing 1 part white granulated sugar dissolved in 4 parts water closely matches the preferences of most hummingbird species. This 1:4 ratio provides approximately 20% sugar concentration, which delivers substantial energy while flowing easily through hummingbird feeding apparatus. Stronger concentrations may provide more energy per unit volume, but can become difficult for birds to process. While weaker solutions may not provide adequate caloric density to justify the energy expenditure required for feeding. The preparation process affects both nectar quality and storage life. Using purified or filtered water eliminates chlorine and other chemicals that might affect taste or bird health, while boiling the water helps dissolve sugar completely and sterilizes the solution. However, boiling is not essential if clean water and pure sugar are used, and many feeders prepare nectar using cold water with thorough stirring. Ingredients and additives. Only pure white granulated sugar should be used for hummingbird nectar preparation. Brown sugar Honey, artificial sweeteners, and other sugar substitutes can contain compounds that are harmful to hummingbirds or provide inadequate nutrition. The minimal processing of white sugar eliminates most additives while providing pure sucrose that closely matches natural nectar composition. Red food coloring, once commonly recommended to enhance feeder attractiveness, is now known to be unnecessary and potentially harmful. Modern feeders incorporate red elements in their construction to provide visual attraction without requiring artificial coloring in the nectar itself. Clear nectar allows easy monitoring of freshness and reduces the introduction of unnecessary chemicals. Commercial nectar products offer convenience but typically cost significantly more than homemade solutions while providing no nutritional advantages. Some commercial products include preservatives that extend storage life, though these additives are unnecessary if nectar is prepared fresh and replaced regularly. Storage and shelf life. Fresh nectar provides optimal nutrition and taste while minimizing the risk of fermentation or contamination. Refrigerated nectar can be stored for up to 1 week, though shorter storage periods ensure maximum freshness and bird appeal. Preparing nectar in quantities sufficient for 3 to 4 days of use balances. Convenience with quality maintenance. Signs of nectar deterioration include cloudiness, fermentation odors, and visible mold growth. Nectar that has developed any of these characteristics should be discarded immediately, and feeders thoroughly cleaned before refilling. In hot weather, nectar deterioration can occur within 2 to 3 days, requiring more frequent replacement than during cooler periods. Freezing prepared nectar in ice cube trays or small containers allows gardeners to prepare larger quantities while maintaining freshness. Frozen nectar can be thawed as needed, providing convenience during peak feeding periods when daily preparation might become burdensome. Maintenance schedules and cleaning protocols. Regular cleaning requirements. Consistent feeder maintenance directly affects hummingbird health and feeding station attractiveness. Dirty feeders can harbor harmful bacteria and fungi while developing residues that affect nectar taste and bird appeal. Establishing regular cleaning schedules ensures optimal conditions while preventing the development of serious contamination problems. The frequency of cleaning depends on weather conditions, nectar consumption rates, and local contamination factors. During hot summer weather, feeders should be cleaned and refilled every 2 to 3 days to prevent fermentation and bacterial growth. In cooler conditions, weekly cleaning may be sufficient, though nectar should still be replaced if it shows any signs of deterioration. Thorough cleaning requires disassembly of all feeder components and washing with hot water and mild detergent. Bottle brushes and specialized feeder brushes help remove residues from narrow feeding ports and internal surfaces that are difficult to reach. Rinsing with dilute bleach solution, 1 part bleach to 9 parts water, provides additional sanitization, though thorough rinsing with clear water is essential to remove all bleach residues. Seasonal maintenance considerations. Spring preparation involves thorough cleaning of feeders that may have been stored over winter, along with inspection of seals, ports, and mounting hardware that may have deteriorated during storage. Early season maintenance should include replacement of worn components and verification that all seals remain watertight. Summer maintenance focuses on frequent cleaning and nectar replacement to prevent deterioration in hot weather. Monitoring for wasp and bee activity becomes particularly important during summer months when insect populations peak and competition for sugar sources intensifies. Fall maintenance should emphasize reliability and weather protection, as migrating birds depend increasingly on artificial nectar sources. Late-season feeders may receive heavy use from multiple species and require more frequent attention than during other periods. Winter maintenance in climates with resident hummingbird populations requires special attention to preventing freezing while maintaining nectar quality. Heated feeders or frequent replacement of frozen nectar ensures continuous availability during cold periods. Common problems and solutions. Insect management. Ants represent one of the most persistent challenges in hummingbird feeder management. These insects can quickly discover and overwhelm feeders, consuming nectar while potentially deterring hummingbirds through their sheer numbers. Ant moats filled with water create effective barriers that prevent crawling insects from reaching feeders without requiring chemical interventions. Commercial ant moats can be purchased separately or may be integrated into feeder designs. These devices suspend feeders above water-filled reservoirs that ants cannot cross. Regular maintenance of ant moats requires keeping them filled with clean water and ensuring that vegetation or debris doesn't create bridges that allow insects to bypass the water barrier. Petroleum jelly applied to mounting poles and hanging hardware can provide temporary ant control, but requires frequent reapplication and may pose risks to birds that come into contact with these substances. Natural alternatives include cinnamon, coffee grounds, or other aromatic substances scattered around feeder bases, though these methods typically provide less reliable control than properly maintained water barriers. Bee and wasp issues. Bees and wasps can quickly overwhelm hummingbird feeders, particularly during late summer, when natural nectar sources become scarce. These insects not only consume nectar intended for hummingbirds, but can create intimidating swarms that prevent birds from accessing feeders. Bee guards installed over feeding ports prevent larger insects from accessing nectar, while allowing hummingbird bills to pass through the protective barriers. These devices typically consist of small plastic or metal cages, with openings sized specifically for hummingbird bills. Yellow jacket traps positioned away from feeding areas can help reduce wasp populations without interfering with hummingbird activities. However, these traps should be placed at considerable distances from feeders to avoid attracting more wasps to the feeding area. Feeder design modifications can also help reduce insect problems. Saucer-style feeders with feeding ports positioned above the nectar level prevent insects from drowning in the nectar, while making access more difficult for crawling insects. Aggressive bird behavior. Territorial hummingbirds can create significant challenges by monopolizing feeders and aggressively excluding other birds from feeding areas. While this behavior is natural and indicates healthy bird populations, it can prevent observers from enjoying diverse hummingbird activity. Multiple feeders positioned beyond the sight lines of each other can help address territorial behavior by creating separate territories that different birds can defend. Spacing feeders around building corners, behind trees, or at different elevations allows multiple birds to establish feeding territories without constant conflict. Clustered feeders positioned close together can sometimes overwhelm even the most aggressive territorial birds, allowing subordinate individuals to access nectar, while dominant birds focus their attention on primary threats. This strategy works best during peak migration periods, when large numbers of birds make complete territorial control impossible. Weather-related challenges. Wind damage represents a significant threat to hummingbird feeders, particularly during severe weather events. Secure mounting systems that can withstand high winds while allowing easy removal for maintenance help protect equipment while ensuring continuous availability of nectar sources. Rain can dilute nectar and create conditions that promote fermentation and contamination. Covered feeders, or those with rain guards, help protect nectar quality during wet periods, while strategic placement under eaves or other protection can minimize weather exposure. Extreme heat can cause rapid nectar deterioration and may even pose risks to feeding birds. Afternoon shade becomes crucial during summer months, while light-colored feeders reflect heat more effectively than dark-colored alternatives. Winter feeding strategies. Cold climate considerations. Year-round hummingbird feeding in cold climates requires specialized equipment and techniques to maintain liquid nectar during freezing conditions. Heated feeders that incorporate electrical warming elements can maintain nectar in liquid form. During moderately cold weather, though extreme cold may overwhelm even heated systems. Rotation systems using multiple feeders allow gardeners to bring frozen feeders indoors for thawing while maintaining continuous nectar availability through alternative feeders. This approach requires dedication to regular monitoring and feeder rotation, but provides reliable nectar sources without requiring electrical installations. Nectar concentration adjustments can help prevent freezing in moderately cold conditions. Slightly stronger sugar solutions, approaching 1 to 3 ratios, have lower freezing points than standard nectar formulations, though care must be taken to avoid concentrations that become difficult for birds to process. Resident population support. Areas with year-round hummingbird populations require consistent feeding programs that provide reliable nectar sources throughout winter months when natural flowers are unavailable. These programs often make the difference between successful overwintering and population declines due to inadequate food resources. Winter nectar consumption typically remains lower than peak summer rates, allowing smaller feeders or less frequent refilling, while maintaining adequate nutrition for resident birds. However, the reliability of winter feeding becomes crucial as alternative food sources disappear with cold weather. Shelter considerations become particularly important during winter feeding programs. Feeders positioned near windbreaks or other weather protection help birds conserve energy while accessing nectar sources, while nearby perching sites allow birds to rest and warm between feeding sessions. Migration timing and winter feeding. Concerns that artificial feeding might delay migration in normally migratory species have been extensively studied and generally found to be unfounded. Hummingbirds appear to migrate based on internal biological clocks rather than food availability, with individuals occasionally remaining past normal migration times due to genetic variations rather than feeder dependence. However, winter feeding programs should be maintained consistently once established, as birds that do remain past normal migration times may depend heavily on artificial nectar sources when natural alternatives become unavailable. Late fall feeding can provide crucial resources for stragglers or late migrants that may benefit from additional nutrition before attempting long journeys. Extended feeding programs often reveal interesting individual variations in migration timing and may provide valuable data for researchers studying migration patterns. Creating effective hummingbird feeding stations requires attention to detail, consistent maintenance, and understanding of hummingbird behavior and needs. The most successful feeding programs combine high-quality equipment with strategic placement, proper nectar preparation, and regular maintenance to create resources that birds can depend upon throughout their active seasons. The reward for this effort is intimate contact with some of nature's most remarkable creatures and the satisfaction of supporting their populations through carefully managed artificial feeding programs. If you liked what you heard today, consider purchasing other books by Bradley Barkhurst, including Underlying Love, A Worthington, Ohio Mystery. It's 1941 in the quaint village of Worthington, Ohio. Life is changing at the end of the Great Depression. Elizabeth Russo, 23, teaches elementary school but feels uncertain about her future. Her Sicilian immigrant father ran the Red and White, a popular village general store. 5 years prior, Elizabeth's high school sweetheart Samuel left the village abruptly, leaving her with unanswered questions. Now engaged to George, the Red and White's accountant, Elizabeth still can't forget Samuel. When her father tragically passes away, and her mother goes to Cincinnati to help her ailing Aunt Gracie, Elizabeth is forced to be alone. Then one night, Elizabeth receives a phone call from her mother, asking her to come to Cincinnati to see her ailing aunt. Before leaving, and without notice, Samuel, Elizabeth's high school sweetheart, unexpectedly shows up in the village. Upon Elizabeth's return from Cincinnati, she hears a scream and sees a figure fleeing. The village banker, Mr. Collins, is found murdered, with suspicion falling on a local hobo. Elizabeth and her quirky neighbor, Betty Wimsfeld, investigate the murder. As they uncover village secrets, Elizabeth struggles with her feelings for George and Samuel. Will Elizabeth solve the murder mystery? Will she choose her stable engagement or risk rekindling an old flame? Find out in Underlying Love, A Worthington, Ohio Mystery, available through major book retailers and underlyinglove.com. Stay tuned for the next episode of Little Winged Wonders, DI projects to attract hummingbirds.